Almost 380 years ago, pirates raided Baltimore in West Cork. The current residents of the village are putting on a play that investigates how the raid came about. Back then, Baltimore was at the centre of a power struggle over its ownership. The Earl of Cork, Richard Boyle, who oversaw the plantations of much of Munster, the nearly bankrupt Finian O'Driscoll, who owned the lease to Baltimore, and Sir Walter Coppinger, a staunch Roman Catholic with a deep hatred of Baltimore's Protestant settlers, who had in turn blocked his plan to buy the lease. We Who Are Blameless, the new play, looks at who was responsible for the raid that resulted in 108 villagers being abducted into slavery.
O'Driscoll, then the law must be seen to take its course. I actually wrote the play and decided to write the play because I had two fairly strong motivations about that. One was that my great-great-grandfather was a hugely successful Victorian playwright, and he disappeared from history. He's now only known for one play, which was Our American Cousins, that Abraham Lincoln was shot during the second act. Someone disappearing from history became something of an obsession of mine.
Rupert's play deals with the disappeared, but how did this come about at that time?
The Barbary pirates were rampant all around the Mediterranean, and they were attacking many coastal villages around there. But they had never ventured this far north, really. But a couple of years before they came to Ireland, they did go to Iceland and make a raid there. Their boats had suddenly got a little bit bigger and more proficient, and they could venture further.
The corsairs were a massive problem in those days, and they were sailing about because they had been what were known as Mediterranean galley rats, where they were only based on Tangiers with their galleys, so they could go around the Mediterranean easily enough and steal people and do piracy and all the rest of it.
So in 1631 they arrived in Ireland anyway. They came to England with two boats, about 200 men in one boat and about 80 in the other. And they sank two boats in Dungarvan and came all the way down here. So one of the captains in the fishing boats in Dungarvan was called John Hackett, and they asked him to take them into Kinsale, and he said no, he thought Baltimore would be better. They landed outside the harbour where the beacon is now, in a little cove called the Eastern Hole, just underneath the cliffs there. They hid from the sight of the townspeople. There were two settlements really at that time in the town. One was around the castle here and the other was over in the cove. They came to the cove first and they took most of the inhabitants from there. They had the element of surprise, I suppose. And there was a little track leading from the cove over towards here. But by the time they got towards the castle, the alarm had gone off and they didn't get so many captives from this side of the town.
I assumed that they were Irish villagers who were stolen away, but actually it was a town then. It was a royal borough. It was considered quite, it was a thriving community of Protestants, and there was supposed to be only one Catholic in the town.
The young, healthy men would probably have fared the worst because they'd have been taken to the galleys and would have had a very tough time, in the galleys as slaves, with a short lifespan because it was so tough. The people with trades would have been put into their trade if they could sew or cook or whatever it was their talent. They would probably have gone into big houses and doing that kind of thing. Children were particularly sought after because they would grow up as slaves in the house, but would have become part of the families, actually. So some of them mightn't have had such a bad time.
As well as the abductions, there was also a further impact on the community.
The remaining townspeople here were very panicked by the whole situation, and the whole town went into decline very rapidly because they wanted to leave the coastline in case it would happen again. So most of the remaining townspeople went up the river towards Skibbereen, which was a very tiny little spot at the time. And Skibbereen began to expand and Baltimore went into decline.
We Who Are Blameless looks at the complex political landscape of the time, as well as bringing home to us the terrible fate facing those who were abducted. Rupert's hope is that this play will remind the current residents of this thriving West Cork community of the trauma which befell those that came before them.
The disappearance of the villagers here, the disappearance of Richard Boyle, the first Earl of Cork, from Irish history. They were taken, and history doesn't quite relate precisely why. Nobody quite knows, and so that's a nice whodunit, which gradually began to take over my play.